So welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to our lecture series called Daily News in Shorts. In this lecture series, we cover a particular day's current affairs in a very short span of time. Now, please do not forget to revise this lecture as well. Watching this lecture won't do the job, okay? Just after watching it, you need to revise it as well, because revision helps in consolidating these current affairs in your memory. Otherwise, you'll quickly forget them. So watching this lecture is job half done. Revise it afterwards, okay? And you can revise it from the notes provided by us on our Telegram channel. Alright, now let's begin today's discussion. But first, let's take a look at the list of topics that we shall cover today. Okay, so daily current affairs, 30th July, Wednesday, and here is the list. So today we'll be covering these 4 topics for our current affairs lecture. Number 1 on this list is famine in Gaza. It's a famine-like situation, a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Okay, so we will talk about this because the leading international organization for food security has basically expressed this concern in Gaza. Okay, so we'll talk about famine in Gaza and, well, what is the technical criteria that a place has to fulfill for that place or for a famine to be declared in that place. Okay, so we'll talk about this. Then recently, a group of researchers have found out a link between air pollution and dementia. Now, dementia is a disease that happens mostly in old age. But if you are regularly exposed to air pollutants, well, your chances of having dementia increase. So what is this connection? We'll talk about this. Then, as you all know, flash floods have happened in India. The recent case was in Himachal Pradesh and around 100 people have lost their lives. So it's a very dire situation, very bad situation. Therefore, this brings into focus the vulnerability of different regions of India as far as flash floods are concerned. So we'll try to understand what flash floods are and which regions of India are vulnerable to this. Okay, and what role does climate change or global warming play in this situation? So we'll talk about this. And in the end, we'll talk about NISAR mission. Okay, NASA-ISRO joint mission. The satellite is going to be launched today. Okay. That is why we are discussing this, though we have discussed this 10 days back. Therefore, I am going to only discuss the equipment used in this satellite, which is synthetic aperture radars. The other details about this NISAR mission have been discussed earlier in the previous current affairs lecture. Okay, so we won't waste time. Clear? So synthetic aperture radars, which would be used for Earth observation on this satellite, NISAR satellite. Clear? So these are the 4 topics that we shall zero in our attention on. Let's start discussing them one by one, starting with famine in Gaza. Okay. Now you all know that, well, a very severe humanitarian crisis is underway in Gaza. And the reason for that humanitarian crisis is because, well, Gaza is involved in a war with Israel. Because Hamas operates from Gaza and Hamas attacked Israel. Okay. Now Israel wants to, well, eliminate Hamas and destroy Hamas. And because of this war between Hamas and Israel, well, people of Gaza are suffering. Now, the thing is that Israel blocked all humanitarian aid to Gaza, because of which a famine-like situation has occurred. Clear? Now, when people have asked Israel, why are you blocking humanitarian aid? So, Israel's justification is that, well, in the garb of this humanitarian aid, many weapons are being smuggled to Hamas. So, we are not able to fight our war properly. But the thing is, Israel, in the fear of arms being smuggled into Gaza, have blocked the entire humanitarian aid, and which has created a food shortage related crisis in Gaza. Okay, famine-like situation in Gaza. Clear? Now, some of you who do not understand the word famine, well, let me tell you, famine means shortage of food. When people start dying of hunger because there is lack of availability of food, that is famine. And that situation has arrived in Gaza. Okay? Makes sense? Now, because of this dire situation, many countries have put pressure on Israel to basically remove that blockade on humanitarian aid, right? Now, Israel has partially removed that blockade, but the situation is really bad. Now, in this news item, we will talk about what is a famine. Okay, what are the technical specifications of a famine and which organization has declared a famine-like situation in Gaza? Okay, what about that organization? What is this organization called? So we'll talk about this organization and we'll also talk about the definition of famine. Clear? Okay. So famine in Gaza. So what is in the news? The Integrated Food Security Phase Classification. Okay, this is the name of the organization, IPC. Said Gaza has teetered on the brink of famine for 2 years, but recent developments have dramatically worsened the situation. Okay, a formal famine declaration requires the kind of data that lack of access to Gaza and mobility within has largely denied. Now look, the thing is, IPC says that for declaring famine in an area, there are certain specifications. Okay, if that particular area fulfills that criteria, then a famine is formally declared in that area. But for those specifications, we need data. And currently, Israel has blocked all access to Gaza. Therefore, researchers or people cannot go to Gaza to get this data to know whether there is a serious food shortage situation so that we can declare a famine in that place or not. So they have said that lack of data because of access to Gaza has basically stopped us from declaring a formal famine. But whatever reports we are receiving, on the basis of that, it is a famine-like situation. Clear? The IPC has only declared famine a few times. Okay, famine has been declared by IPC. IPC is the international authority, most renowned authority that declares famine. It has only declared famine only a few times in the history. Okay, that means famine is a very rare situation. But when it occurs, it is a really bad situation. Clear? In Somalia in 2011, South Sudan in 2017 and 2020, okay, and parts of Sudan's western Darfur region. So very rarely famine is declared, okay, because the conditions are really rare. They're so severe that they happen occasionally. But IPC says they might be happening in Gaza right now, but we don't know about it. We can't declare a famine because we lack access to data, because Israel has blocked all access. Make sense? Now, what is this formal criteria on the basis of which a formal famine is declared? Remember, famine is shortage of food so that people die of hunger. That is a famine. Now, what is the criteria for declaring famine in a particular area? Formal declaration, official declaration. Okay. The area is classified as in famine when all three of the following conditions are confirmed. Okay. What are these three conditions? Condition number 1, at least 20% of the households have an extreme lack of food and are essentially starving. So 20% of the households don't have food and they are starving to death. Okay. At least 30% of the children 6 months to 5 years old suffer from acute malnourishment, wasting, child wasting, meaning they are too thin for their height. So 30% of the children are acutely malnourished, and at least 2 people or 4 children under 5 per 10,000 are dying daily due to starvation. Okay. So people are dying daily due to starvation. When all three conditions are fulfilled, then formally IPC declares a famine. Okay. And this declaration is important because once famine is declared, then all the global aid organizations start to pitch in and help that area. Make sense? So this is the formal definition. Remember all three criteria, and remember there is a and in between them, which means all three conditions have to be met. It's not that one condition is met, the other two are not being met, so famine can be declared. No, all three have to be met, then only famine can be declared officially. Make sense? Okay. Now about this organization called IPC. So Integrated Food Security Phase Classification is a globally recognized system for classifying the severity and magnitude of food insecurity and malnourishment. So whenever we have to identify whether a particular region is suffering from food insecurity, malnourishment or anything like that, we look for IPC, because IPC is the global most renowned organization that categorizes areas on the basis of food security. Okay, and their categorization is acceptable all over the world. So it's the most renowned. It provides a common framework for governments, aid organizations and other stakeholders to understand and respond to food crisis. So the criteria that they have specified for famine is also used by other governments for identifying areas which are suffering from food shortages. Clear? The IPC is a collaborative effort. That means governments, UN agencies, NGOs and other actors have collaborated to make IPC. Clear? Now, IPC basically has a 5 category based classification. Okay. Phase 1 is minimal. So, if an area is suffering from minimal food shortage, then they say that this area is suffering from phase 1 food insecurity. Then, if food shortage increases, then they call it phase 2 stressed. Then phase 3 crisis. Then phase 4 emergency. And phase 5 when all those 3 conditions are met and a famine is declared. So, famine is phase 5. That is why this organization is called Integrated Food Security Phase Classification. Okay. So, on the basis of these 5 phases, okay, or on the basis of different levels of food shortages, well, countries are put into each of these categories. Okay. And if a country lies in phase 5, which they say Gaza might be, but because of lack of data, we can't say for sure. But if a country lies in phase 5, well, that means a formal famine needs to be declared. Clear? So remember this part. All right. And now let's talk about next news item, which is air pollution and dementia. Okay. Now listen to me carefully. You see, first of all, you need to know what is dementia. So dementia is a neurodegenerative disorder. Okay. When people reach old age, their brain starts to malfunction. Okay. They have this, they basically, people start to forget things. Their memory gets reduced. Their cognitive ability gets reduced. Okay. So your brain functioning gets reduced. You start to forget things. Now, all the diseases, most of the diseases that cause this brain malfunction, like memory loss, cognitive functioning, well, they are grouped in the larger category called dementia. So, dementia is the umbrella term for various diseases or disorders in which you have memory loss, brain functioning is reduced. Okay. So, long story cut short, dementia is a disease or a group of diseases when your brain functioning gets reduced. And the symptoms are memory loss, cognitive functioning, analytical ability, all this gets reduced. Now, generally, people in the old age suffer from this. Okay. So, it happens to you during old age. But you must know this, that there are some old people who do not show these symptoms, whose memory is sharp as anyone, right? Whose cognitive ability is sharp as anyone. But there are some old people who suffer from this problem. So, some old people suffer from dementia, some don't. Now, what are the factors behind the occurrence of dementia? There are many factors. But recently, scientists have revealed that long-term exposure to air pollution increase your chances of developing dementia in the old age. So, if currently you are exposed to air pollution, severe air pollution, as most Indians are, by the way, almost in all the cities. So, if you are currently exposed to air pollution, well, the chances that you will develop dementia in old age are higher. These scientists have established a link between exposure to air pollutants and development or probability of having dementia in the old age. So, right now you might not feel it, but maybe because of air pollution, your old age will be bad. Okay. So, what have these researchers said? Let's talk about this. Okay. So, air pollution and dementia. So, well, these researchers have published their results in a medical journal, the most famous medical journal internationally, that is Lancet. Okay. Nonetheless, these researchers have identified 3 air pollutants. Okay. They have identified 3 air pollutants, only 3. And they have said that long-term exposure to these 3 air pollutants increase your chances of developing dementia. What are these 3 air pollutants? Number 1, particulate matter 2.5. Well, particulate matter basically is matter, solid particles that are so small that they are not visible to the naked eye. Okay, these are so small that their diameter, the diameter of these particles is 2.5 microns. The diameter is 2.5 microns. You can't see it from naked eye. but you are surrounded by it and you are inhaling it. Okay. Now, generally, particulate matter 2.5 is released by vehicular emissions, industrial activity. Clear? Now, if you are exposed to particulate matter for longer periods of time, you have 17% more chance of developing dementia. Then the other is nitrous oxides. Okay, nitrogen dioxide or nitrous oxides. Well, nitrous oxides are released when you burn fossil fuels. So again, vehicles, industrial activity, they release large proportions of nitrous oxides, and you, me, all of us are exposed to them. They also increase your chance of dementia. And the third pollutant is black carbon, soot. These dark particles that float in the air, dark carbon particles that float in the air, it is called soot. Okay, these dark, that generally when you burn coal, you see these dark particles, right, very small, that you inhale them also. Sometimes you can see them with naked eye, sometimes you don't, but these are dark black particles made up of carbon called soot. And if you inhale them too much, if they get deposited in your lungs, definitely you will suffer from respiratory diseases, but researchers have now shown that you'll also suffer from dementia related diseases. Okay, so these are the three pollutants that research was done on. Okay, now what is the situation for Indians? 99% of Indians, okay, remember this, 99% of Indians are currently exposed to these three pollutants beyond safe limits. Okay, most urban cities in India have these air pollutants beyond safe limits. Those safe limits have been identified by WHO. Indians breathe this air in which these three pollutants are beyond safety limits. So all of us have a higher probability of developing dementia in our old age as compared to other countries where air pollution is low. So this is a sad situation. Okay. Now, why does exposure to these three pollutants cause dementia? Okay, how can these pollutants, generally we heard that these pollutants harm your respiratory system. How can these pollutants harm your brain? There are two reasons behind this. Okay, one is oxidative stress. When these particles accumulate too much in your body, they release free radical oxygen atoms. Now these free radical oxygen atoms basically cause cell damage, and because you're continuously breathing these particles, your body also doesn't get the time to detoxify you from these free oxygen atoms. Your body starts to produce free oxygen atoms, okay, which will cause cell damage. Now if you allow your body some time to detoxify your body from these free oxygen atoms, not oxygen molecule that we breathe, oxygen atoms, free radicals, well, then this stress builds up. These oxygen atoms build up and they harm your brain also. Okay, this is known as oxidative stress. So when, because of these three pollutants, free oxygen, look, if some of you are confused what free oxygen is, the oxygen we breathe that is essential for us is oxygen molecule. But a single oxygen atom is free radical. Okay, and it causes a lot of damage, DNA damage, cell damage, right? It has to be detoxified. But if you're continuously breathing this air, this doesn't get detoxified. It builds up in your body and causes inflammation, brain cell inflammation. This is oxidative stress. And these pollutants also sometimes reach your brain and cause inflammation of brain cells. Now this inflammation damages your brain cells. So these are the reasons. Make sense? Okay. All right. Now let's quickly shift to third news item, and that is flash floods impacting India. Now recently in Himachal Pradesh, flash floods occurred. Okay. And these flash floods basically claimed more than 100 people. Okay. Claimed the lives of more than 100 people. Now flash floods is not a new phenomenon. In this year alone, many flash floods have occurred throughout India. Okay, in Sikkim, in many parts of Himalaya, in Uttarakhand, and now in Himachal. Now, first of all, you need to be aware of the definition of flash floods. Okay, what are flash floods? Then only we'll talk about what we need to cover in this particular news item. Okay, what are flash floods basically? So you see, flash floods are floods you understand. Okay, you understand the word flood, flooding. Flash floods. Now, whenever there is extreme rainfall, so extreme that flooding occurs within 6 hours. Okay, generally rainfall is gradual. The rain pours and pours and pours and pours, and then roads start to fill up, flood-like situation happens. Okay, but when rainfall is so extreme that within 6 hours floods happen, that is called flash flooding. Flash means quick. Flooding generally occurs if rainfall is continuously occurring for 7 days, 8 days on the trot. But flash floods is a situation in which within 6 hours there is flooding. Now, this situation occurred in Himachal recently, and it has claimed the lives of many people. Okay, many people also associate this with cloudburst when extreme rainfall happens, right? Now, flash floods have become quite common now in India, and that is why a deep research and study has to be done with respect to which areas are more vulnerable to flash floods, so that government can take remedial measures, preventive measures to protect people from flash floods like situation. Okay, so we need to identify the hotspots where flash floods have a higher probability of occurrence. Okay, we need a proper research. So far, government has not done the research, but recently researchers from IIT Gandhinagar, they basically did that research and have identified the causes behind increased flash flooding in India and what remedial measures can be taken by the government. Clear? So let's talk about this. Okay, so flash floods, you understand, flash means quick. So whenever there is extreme rainfall and within 6 hours, possibly even below 3 hours, flooding occurs. Clear? Now, this report that was prepared by IIT Gandhinagar students, they basically identified key drivers. Because what they have identified is that flash floods have increased in India. Okay, their occurrence has increased in India. So, what is causing this increased frequency of flash floods? Okay, so what are the key drivers? First of all, they said that look, generally flash floods occur when there is high rainfall, right? But high rainfall is not the only factor. How your soil is, if your soil is not that stable, solid, okay, if it does not absorb water, then this water that is pouring through rainfall will flow quickly and cause floods. If your soil is porous, right, then it will absorb the water falling through rain quickly and floods won't happen. You understand? So flash floods is not the only function of rainfall. It also is dependent on factors like soil, terrain, if there are steep slopes, if it is a mountainous region, right? In fact, researchers have said that only 25% of flash floods in India so far occurred only due to rainfall. Only due to rainfall. The other 75% of flash floods occurred not just because of rainfall, but factors like soil, terrain, and other factors. So only 25% of flash floods were like that, in which you can say only rainfall is guilty. But in other 75%, other factors also played a role. Okay, so high extreme precipitation, this causes flash floods. Then your soil, what is its porosity? Okay, how porous it is, how solid it is. Is there any risk of landslides or anything like that? That basically determines flash floods. Then terrain. If you have steep slopes and high relief, immediately there is a mountain that rises with a steep slope, high relief. This type of terrain is generally found in Himalayan region, right? Then your place is vulnerable to flash floods. Okay, Himachal Pradesh is in Himalayan region, and that is why Himachal Pradesh is quite vulnerable to flash floods. Okay, and global warming. Global warming is increasing the intensity and frequency of flash floods. How? It is said that if temperatures increase by 1 degree Celsius, the ability of air to hold more moisture increases by 7%. So if temperatures are high, the air is holding more moisture. So whenever there will be a rainfall, it will be extreme because the air has stored so much moisture because of high temperature. So global warming is also increasing the intensity of flash floods. Okay, because the rainfall is becoming extreme these days. You understand? Now, flash floods in India. So you see, as per their research, 75% of flash floods occur during monsoon season. Naturally so, because monsoon is the season where we receive the bulk of our rainfall. The entire subcontinent receives the bulk of its rainfall during monsoon season. So naturally, 75% of flash floods occur during monsoon season. But this research has pointed out that, well, in the last 20-30 years, pre-monsoon flash floods have doubled. Okay, generally we are used to flash floods during monsoon season, but now India is also witnessing pre-monsoon flash floods, because earlier there were only occasions, or earlier there were only 1 or 2 pre-monsoon flash floods. Now it has increased to 4 or 5. So this is a problem. Then this study by IIT Gandhinagar people, or the researchers from there, they have also identified 3 regions of India which are the most vulnerable to flash floods. Okay, what are those 3 regions? Remember this: Himalayan region, hence that is why Himachal, Uttarakhand and Northeast, they are vulnerable. Then West Coast, okay, and Central India, Peninsular Plateau. These are the 3 big hotspots. These are the most vulnerable areas. Clear? Now, well, flash floods are increasing, and the key drivers we have discussed, the 4 key drivers. Okay, one important driver is climate change, global warming, and we know why. Now, this reality is known to us that flash floods have increased as compared to the past, and they are going to increase in future as well, because global warming is not stopping anytime soon. So these flash floods are going to increase in future. So what should be our strategy? What should be our adaptation strategy so that our people adapt to this new reality that flash floods are going to occur? So how should we adapt? What should be our adaptation strategy? Okay, so as per this report, the authorities should create region specific plans. Okay, because different regions have different soil types, different terrains, different topography. So you should create region specific plans, okay, for dealing with flash floods, so that in case there is a heavy downpour, what should you do based on your soil, terrain, topography? Region specific plans should be built by authorities. Second, well, now new areas are vulnerable to flash floods. Areas which had never seen flash floods in their lives are now witnessing flash floods. So you need to identify new hotspots. Hotspots are those areas which are vulnerable to flash floods, okay, and build climate resilient infrastructure, okay, flood resilient buildings, flood resilient roads in those areas. And third, well, have better early warning systems, targeted disaster preparedness and long-term adaptation plans. Okay, so these are the things you have to do in long term to save your people, because flash floods are going to occur now. Climate change is going nowhere, at least in the next 10 years. Okay, so now what can we do? Well, we can adapt to this new reality so that people don't die and there is minimal loss of property. Clear? And last topic of the day would be synthetic aperture radars in NISAR mission. So today, NISAR satellite is going to be launched. Okay, it is going to be launched from Sriharikota in Andhra Pradesh aboard an ISRO vehicle. Okay, GSLV basically. Now NISAR, this satellite is an Earth observation satellite. Okay, and this Earth observation satellite will basically make or take images of the Earth using radars. Now on this satellite, there are 2 types of radars. One built by NASA, the L-band, and the other S-band radar built by ISRO. That is why it is a collaborative mission, and that is why it is called NISAR, NASA ISRO Synthetic Aperture Radar, because the instrument which will be used for Earth observation on this satellite is a synthetic aperture radar. In fact, 2 synthetic aperture radars, right? Now, we have talked about NISAR mission in our previous lectures of current affairs, okay, like some 8-9 days back. So today we are not going to focus on the mission part. Today we are going to focus on what these synthetic aperture radars are. Okay, so let's talk about this. So synthetic aperture radar in NISAR. Okay, so about synthetic aperture radars. So basically, what is a radar? So radar basically sends electromagnetic waves, okay, microwaves, radio waves, and when these electromagnetic waves hit an object, okay, they are reflected back. So a radar will send a electromagnetic wave that will hit an object and come back like a reflection, like an echo, okay. When it will come back, this radar will basically calculate the object, its distance, because you will be able to, you know the speed of electromagnetic wave, you know the time under which, or the time period within which this wave went to the object and came back, right? All these things you know. So through analysis of this reflected signal, you can create the image of this object. You can create the distance of that object, okay, everything. So that is why we call these radars as imaging radars. So without actual camera, you are using radars who are sending electromagnetic waves, microwaves, to create an image. Look, cameras can only look during daytime, but radars can create this image daytime, nighttime, cloudy weather, every time. That is why we use radars. Clear? Now these radars have very huge dishes. You have seen these satellite dishes, right? On buildings, right? The larger the size of this dish, the better would be its imaging quality, because it will be able to receive bulk signals. Okay. Now, you want to use these radars for Earth observation as well. But in space, your satellites cannot carry these huge dishes. Okay. And that is why you have created synthetic aperture radars. So these synthetic aperture radars do not have huge satellite dish. They don't, okay, because it is difficult to carry this huge satellite dish in space. Whatever limitations it has with respect to dishes, okay, it can't have huge dishes. It makes up for those limitations through software. So its software is so powerful that even with small dish, the signals captured by that small radar can create better imaging. This is what a synthetic aperture radar is, okay. If you don't understand what I just said, just remember that, well, synthetic aperture radars are those radars which are used on satellites for Earth observation, for Earth imaging. The best part about synthetic aperture radars is that the imaging quality is good and they can operate day, night. Even if the clouds come in between, they can still penetrate through the clouds and look at the ground. Okay, that is why some people or some countries use these radars in their spy satellites that they use to spy on other countries. Okay, in fact, India uses a synthetic aperture radar in one of its satellite called RISAT. Okay, radar imaging satellite RISAT. Now, what's so special about NISAR? Clear? Now, the thing is, just remember, NISAR is the most expensive satellite ever built. Like the most expensive one. Okay? Why? Because it is difficult to build this. Because this would be the first satellite which will have not one, two radars. Okay? For better quality of imaging. These one radar will have a frequency in the L band. Now you don't need to get into what L band, S band is. Just remember these terms. Just cram these terms. Okay. For now, when we'll cover science and technology in separate lectures, I'll explain to you what L band, S band is. But this mission has two radars. L band, which will observe or which will make observations in L band frequency, and S band. L band is good for deep imaging and images of small things. Okay, it can penetrate deep into the soil also. S band is good for broader imaging, big things. So if you want to observe small things from space, L band, and if you want to observe big things from space, S band. L band is built by NASA, S band is built by ISRO. Clear? And this will be the first satellite that will have two radars, and it is very difficult to mount two radars which will coordinate with each other for images on a satellite. That is why this mission was announced way back in 2007-8, but it took so much time to implement this mission. Okay, it has been what, 17 years, 16-17 years later we are launching this satellite, because it is a difficult thing. It took a lot of time and engineering ingenuity to make this satellite. Okay, that's about it. That's all you need to know about synthetic aperture radars and L band, S band. Okay, now what sort of contribution is made by each space agency? So what is NASA doing? What is ISRO doing? So NASA is providing L band radar, 12-meter antenna, and many other components and systems, including GPS control, everything. What is ISRO providing? ISRO is providing S band radar, the rocket on which this satellite will go, the spacecraft, its subsystems, everything. Okay, so the launch will be taken care of by ISRO, and well, L band and other components, GPS, would be provided by USA. Now this is the most expensive satellite. Now the bulk of funding is coming from NASA. NASA is spending 1.16 billion, ISRO is just spending 90 million. Okay, nonetheless, it is a collaborative mission and a proud moment for people who want to see good relations between India and the USA. Okay, so India-USA space relationship, well, they are improving and they are on a very good pedestal. This mission is a proof of that. Clear? And on that note, we'll be signing off. On that note, we'll conclude today's lecture. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I'm sure it has added value to your preparation, but it will add more value if you revise this lecture from the notes provided by us. And these notes are shared on our Telegram channel, and the link to our Telegram channel is provided in the comment section below. So make sure you check that out. And I'll be signing off with the promise of seeing you again with another set of news items. Thank you, everyone.